Hello and welcome to the DP World Tour preview show. I'm your host Mark Hill on the Tour Junkies Network, and we are back flying solo this week. Thank you very much to my guests last week, Tom Jacobs and Craig Thompson. Really good back and forth. Went on for an hour. This is going to be a short and sweet show in comparison now that I'm back on my lonesome, but the content from both those guys was excellent. Again, check out their own individual channels when you get a chance. The Jason Parish podcast for Craig Thompson, and you can catch Tom Jacobs on the Mayo Media Network, as well as the Lost for Words podcast as well. Talking of other shows and content, the boys have been busy this week. AT&T, Byron Nelson content out there, coming out of your ears, prize picks, DFS, betting advice, everything you'd like to know from DB and Pat. And interesting enough, we have a Corn Ferry Tour event this week as well. I believe that is the Visit Knoxville Open. Bit of a side story there. We did launch a new sportsbook this week in Arkansas. Bit of a shout out to Bet Saracen over there. So my company sort of behind the tech and the trading side of things for that company. And one of the first, the first golf bet we took was on a Corn Ferry Tour event, and that was the Knoxville Open, and it was on Mr. Cooper Musselman. So I'd be very intrigued watching on this week, both in terms of the content that the kid Gareth Simmons puts out on the Corn Ferry Tour preview show, but also I will be having one eye on Cooper Musselman and see whether we may have a shrewd golf punter in the state of Arkansas. But let's pivot from Arkansas over to Belgium and go into the course breakdown and key stats for this week's event. We are at the Rinkven International Golf Club for the Soudal Open. It's a par 71 measuring 6,924 yards, so just under 7,000 yards there. Relatively flat, exposed track, tree-lined parkland style, bent POA greens in the mix as well. It's a new event on the DP World Tour. We have seen it in a knockout format tournament played here in 2018 and 2019, where the first 36 holes were stroke play orientated. 13 par fours to contend with this week, so certainly had a look at par four scoring when I was going into the deeper dive on the stats. A little bit of wind, nothing untowards. Do expect it to be a little bit soft underfoot, but nothing that the guys can't handle, but maybe not just quite the same amount of bounce compared to what we've seen on some other tracks recently, excluding, of course, the British Masters last week. Probably looking around a target score of in and around 20 under. Could turn into somewhat of a birdie fest. Some of the previous tournaments played here, especially through the 36 holes, when they were trending around 12 under, 13 under, you kind of feel it because the full tournament under the belt, we're going to be looking at a much bigger score on this occasion, or a much lower score on this occasion, I should say. Previous two tournament winners for the knockout format, Guido Migliozzi and Adrian Otegui in 2019 and 2018, respectively. They teed up again this week. From that Guido win, we also have some strokes gain data available, where Guido and eventual runner-up Chris Paisley graded out number one and number two in the field for tee to green. Now, when it comes to betting, it comes to sample size, and it comes to looking into data, you have to take it with a pinch of salt when we've only 36 holes to work off. But we'll put a little bit of weight into tee to green this week. We'll put a little bit of weight into par four scoring. Definitely think the accuracy side of things will come into play, but I'm not going to overweight it, as I mentioned on last week's show, and it stung me a couple of weeks ago where I put too much weight into accurate golfers. Certainly with the shorter nature of the track, there's the element where golfers could overpower it, so not necessarily going to go with finesse over par, but slight bit of weight into that. But certainly the par four scoring side of things, and strokes gained tee to green, recent form, and some course comps as well have been pulled into what I've looked at this week. Let's look at the top of the betting board. Just updated the odds before I jumped on here. Thomas Pieters and Bernd Wiesberger, joint favourites at 18-1. Sam Horsfield and Adrian Moron coming in at 22-1, and Adrian Otegui at 25-1. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Thomas Pieters and Bernd Wiesberger as we get into the show. Let's look at Sam Horsfield then. He finished just outside the top 20 last week at the British Masters, and after that was coming after an injury layoff. I said I did have one eye on him going into the British Masters. He had teed it up at the Zurich match play event, or team event, I should say, over in the States. post the injury at the Saudi International Tournament where he shot a 64 on the opening day before withdrawing on day 2. I wanted to see whether he could get all 4 rounds together. That was encouraging, I guess, the British Open, that he did finish just outside the top 20, managed to play all 4 rounds, but I still want to stay clear of back in Horsfield outright just yet until I'm confident and assured that the injuries are in the rearview mirror. That worries enough to keep me off him. He did open at 20-1. He's drifted out at 22-1, so the market tends to agree on that front. Adrian Meronk's also priced up at 22-1. He struggled last week with 75 on day 2 of the British Masters after back-to-back third-place finishes in Qatar and Catalonia. That Qatar form may correlate here. We'll get into that in a little bit with one of my selections shortly. Off the tee game should have him right in the mix, but the inconsistencies with the irons and over-reliance on the putter sees me continue to swerve Adrian Meronk on this occasion. Adrian Otegi then, lots to respect about Otegi. Miscut in Catalonia following his playoff heartbreak at the ISPS Handed Championship in Spain. Back with top 30 last week, certainly knocking on the door over recent months. Otegi graded out 5th or in the top 5 for tee to green, was irons dialed in and the flat stick promising as well at that ISPS event. Also has a previous win here under his belt. So definitely something to boost his credentials there. Another golfer just outside that top of the board at the minute, but I did when I was originally doing the background research. Ryan Fox was sitting in there also at 25-1. He's drifted out a little bit now. Given the short nature of the track, he could overpower it here. Followed up the win in Ras Al Khaimah with 15th, 8th, and 8th, including an opening round of 66 last week at the Belfry. So has to be respected on recent form. If he can pull it all together and overpower this track, Fox could be right in the mix. The price point just wasn't quite there for me. If he continues to drift, we'll maybe have a little bit of a closer look, but happy enough to stay off Ryan Fox for now. So that brings me to the selections, and I did breeze over Bernd Wiesberger and Thomas Pieters at the top of the show for contrasting reasons, but Bernd Wiesberger, 18-1, widely available out there at the minute, is my first selection this week. And I don't necessarily go or gravitate towards the top of the board. This week, though, the Austrian, he should be the cream of the crop when it comes to this field. Promising top 10 in Catalonia for Wiesberger last time out. He's finished 8th here before in the knockout tournament in 2019, which included a round of 64 on the Friday, so could have some fond memories of coming back here. Regularly grading out top 10 tee to green this year, which is encouraging, including at the Valspar when he headed stateside for a PGA Tour event over there. He's off to the PGA Championship next week. That's a slight worry. Maybe has one eye on that. But he did skip last week at the British Masters to play this tournament. I have to assume that it's put in a schedule for a reason. And I'm happy enough to say that there's some correlated form. The tee to green numbers are encouraging. He seems to be starting to trend in the right direction. So I'm happy to put up Bernd Wiesberger at 18-1. My second selection is Edoardo Molinari, Mr. Dodo. Recent top 10 finish for him in Catalonia suggests there might be life in the old dog just yet. I say old, he's 41, that's only 4 years older than me, but we'll call him older on the DP World Tour as it stands at the minute. Not recorded a DP World Tour win since 2017 in Morocco. Made the cut here in 2019 on his way to 26th place finish. 3 consecutive top 40s overall in recent weeks shows that there is some consistency to his game. If he can pull it all together, he could certainly be knocking on the door. And knocking on the door is what he did a couple of times last year. Italian Open, European Open spring to mind. Methodical, tactical test required here should suit his game. So I'm happy enough to have Edoardo Molinari on my betting card at 40-1. Next, I drop down the board. We have a selection of 80-1, 90-1, and 90-1 to come. Ewen Ferguson, 80-1. Don't often see this price point about someone who's won on the tour in recent weeks. Qatar Masters winner, 2 missed cuts on a T52 since that victory. Maybe inflates his price point a little bit. But the Scotsman should hopefully go well this week. He's done well at the European Bank Open last year on the Challenge Tour, finished 2nd. And even that win at Qatar was around a course where Guido Migliozzi has recorded a T2 and Adrian Otegi has recorded a T5 earlier this year. So 2 former winners of the Belgian knockout also showing up well in Qatar. Perhaps suggests there's some overlapping course correlation there. He was a semi-finalist in the knockout tournament here in 2019 as well to further boost his credentials. So the Scotsman, Ewen Ferguson, recent tour winner, hopefully still buoyed by that, is my selection at 80 to 1. Daniel Gavins, 90 to 1, about the Englishman, who I think I am on now for possibly the 4th consecutive week. And I continue to ride this out because I do believe that another tour win is coming for Daniel Gavins in the not too distant future. Continuing to back him, getting a really good price point again at 90 to 1. I definitely think it's inflated week to week. He's regularly ranking high in tee to green numbers, including first in the field at the Kenya Open at Muthaiga Golf Club. Again, tree-lined nature to the track there, bent green putting surfaces as well. Strong approach game, around the green game seems to be decent. The sixth that ended up, the first tee to green at the Kenya Open resulted in a 6th place finish in Muthaiga overall. And also has the win under his belt last year at Galgorm for the ISPS Honda Invitational or World Invitational in Northern Ireland. Could draw some comparisons there. Short track, tree-lined in nature. Got a good look around here in 2019 as well. Form around that time for Daniel Gavins wasn't the best, but he did show up well, making the final 16 of the knockout tournament. So that was a fairly positive return for the Englishman. Correlatory form, decent tee to green numbers, dialed in irons. Definitely for me, Daniel Gavins is worth a look again this week at 90 to 1. And my final selection on my betting card this week is Lukas Nemec. And I believe he's now 90 to 1 DK Sportsbook, 80 to 1 widely available. Happy to take the 80 to 1 if you have access to Draftkings Sportsbook, or over here in the UK, the likes of 10bet. Well worth having a nibble on Lukas Nemec. 32-year-old Austrian, remains a tour maiden, but is a golfer who's trending in the right direction despite last week's miscut at the Belfry. Kept coming up for me and popping in the models. Graded out inside the top 10 overall within my model, helped by a decent tee to green blended number as well as par 4 scoring popping for the Austrian. Accurate off the tee, he's performed well of late. Shown he can go low. The recent round of 64 at the ISPS Honda springs to mind. Since graduating from the Challenge Tour the end of last season, he's recorded 3rd place finish at Ras Al Khaimah, further top 20s in Kenya as well. A potential course comp here. That event in Spain a couple of weeks ago, as well as top 30s in Qatar and Catalonia. So again, we're getting a price point about a golfer who overall showing fairly good consistency. Tee to green game is trending really well. The putter is not, but we know that the variance around the putting side of things, stroke game putting, could definitely be the one that gets turned around quicker than some of those other elements to his game. So if he keeps up that tee to green game, there's a chance that Lukas Nemec can really compete this week. So he's definitely a golfer I'm going to be on the right side of. That rounds out my betting card then. So with Bernd Wiesberger at 18 to 1, Edoardo Molinari at 40 to 1, Ewen Ferguson at 80 to 1, and Daniel Gavins and Lukas Nemec at 90 to 1. The DFS portion then, I'm going to jump into Bernd Wiesberger at 10,700, Adrian Otegi 10,200, Oliver Becker 9,300. Becker's just qualified for the PGA Championship. That's a little bit of a concern that, again, first time he's going to be teeing it up over there. Is that going to be a distraction for Oliver Becker? But he grades out really strong overall, second in my model. Strong tee to green game, par 4 numbers standing out. My fade in the 9K and above range is going to be Thomas Pieters at 10K. He opened up the year with a DP World Tour win in Abu Dhabi, but he's not been able to replicate that since. Went over to the States for a 5-tournament stint. That included 3 missed cuts and a round of 80 around Augusta. Again, a bit of a tactical test on that occasion. He's had a month layoff, back on home soil here. I guess there's some obligations with local sponsors and that side of it. He's not exactly performed well in Belgium in the past. 39th and a missed cut at the 2 knockout tournament events. And even back here in another competitive event back in 2010 at the Challenge Tour level, Pieters missed cut that day as well. So a golfer that should be respected this week. He's up the top of the board at 18 to 1. On DraftKings, he's 10K plus. He's going to have one eye potentially on next week's tournament. I'm happy enough to fade Thomas Pieters, who I think will be extremely popular. Let's drop down to the 8K range. Edoardo Molinari, George Coetzee, Ashwin Wu. Edoardo Molinari 8,800, George Coetzee 8,700, and Ashwin Wu at 8,600. All graded out really well on my model. Just looking at it very quickly here, Ashwin Wu was 22nd in my model. George Coetzee was 14th in my model. And then Edoardo Molinari was 7th in my model. So good grades in terms of what was coming out there. Ashwin Wu, he's had a similar setup. Wins around similar setups as well. Muthaiga comes to mind recently. could correlate well here and does tend to show up at some random events at times. This could be one of them for Asher and Wu. And George could see a hit and miss, inconsistent, but when he's on his game, he can definitely get into contention. Couple of fades caught my eye. John Catlin, 8,900. Anton Rosner, 8,400. Both graded lower down on my model. Didn't even make it inside the top 45 golfers on my model. So with that 8K price point, I'm happy enough to swerve them this time around. 7K range, it's competitive. Plenty of golfers to like in here. Lukas Nemec at 7,500. Matty Smith at 7,400. Ewen Ferguson, 7,200. And Daniel Gavins at 7,200. Matty Smith side of things, 7,400 price point for him. Again, model-wise, was standing out for me. Didn't quite get there on the betting side of things, but the tee to green certainly trended out well. I think I have him 13th overall in the field on the tee to green numbers, which is sort of a blend of long-term numbers and short-term recent form tee to green. So Matty Smith is in there and respected. That's 4 golfers I've mentioned in that range. 3 I'm putting up outright, and I've added in Matty Smith. I don't actually have a fade in the 7K range this week. I'm letting the side down there, but there's no one really jumped out as an obvious and clear fade for me in the 7K range. 6K range then, Marcel Siem, 6,900, Niall Kearney at 6,700, and Jans Danthorpe, the Swede, at 6,700. All graded out well on my model, all sitting just inside the top 30. Tee to green stats and par 4 scoring, again, weighted heavily. Those guys seem to pop for me on that side of it, so happy enough to put those 3 up in the 6K range this week. And breathe. Now, where are we getting to for our best bet this week? We are heading to the top of the board, and it's going to be Bernd Wiesberger -115 over Thomas Pieters on Draftkings Sportsbook. I managed to grab this at -105 on Pinnacle. Good down to -120 for me. Again, shop around. In terms of hold percentage side of things and the betting side of things, it is a pure matchup. That -115 is a 30-cent line, -115 both sides when it comes to the matchup side of things. So you are paying the tax to bet at DraftKings on this occasion for the -115, but I've seen that price widely available out there. If you can find a book that maybe reduces their hold the day before the tournament, which is quite possible, maybe get some -110s out there, but I'm definitely siding with Wiesberger over Thomas Pieters on this occasion. Pieters, he's off a 1-month layoff after the disappointment in the US of A. He's back on home soil here. Not the best track record to speak of. Wiesberger, in contrast, he's trending well overall. Seems to be warming up nicely ahead of the PGA Championship this week. His tee to green numbers should get him right in the mix up the top of the leaderboard. I say the slight concern is that he might be thinking about jetting off to the States after 2 rounds, but I think Thomas Pieters could well be in the same boat. Get the sponsors' obligations out of the way and then worry about the PGA Championship. I say -115. Bet online have that at the minute. DraftKings Sportsbook have that as well. Good down to -120, but again, shop around, see if that matchup is out there at a better price at your local sportsbook. That is it for this week's show. It has been a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, but I have to go back to work. So I will bid you adieu, and off I go to work. Best of luck, everybody. Green screens and winning tickets at the betting window. Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.